So I'll call this meeting to order. Seeing that we have quorum, first business is approval of the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Sanik, Councillor Schell. All those in favor? Carried. Confirmation of minutes from March 7th. I think we've all had a chance to read them. Is there a mover and a shaker? Thank you, Councillor Sanik. Councillor Schell. All those in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Delegations, we have none scheduled. Briefings. Ms. Roberts, Director of Solid Waste Services, will be present to speak to the committee regarding update on amended Blue Box program plan and material recovery facility. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Coming back this evening to provide an update on the amended Blue Box program plan, which is part of the Waste-Free Ontario Act and the strategy. We're also talking tonight about that plan as well as the material recovery facility. I'm not going to spend too much time going over this. We've done a couple of briefings in the past to talk about the Waste-Free Ontario Act and what it means for the City of Kingston. Just to highlight a couple of notes here, it will transition the existing waste diversion programs from a shared responsibility regime to an individual producer responsibility regime. And under it, there's no prescribed role for municipalities, but we could play a role as a service provider. This is just the structure of how the Waste-Free Ontario Act is laid out. So underneath of it, there are two pieces of legislation, one being the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act and the Waste Diversion Transition Act. That Transition Act is really a mechanism there to enable us to get to a full producer responsibility regime. And as highlighted there, I'm just trying to show where we're trying to get to right now in the province. Back in August, the Minister of the Environment drafted a letter. It wasn't a draft, it was a final letter which directed two parties to agree to an amended Blue Box program plan. So originally in the Strategy for a Waste-Free Ontario Act, they talked about transitioning the Blue Box program plan sometime in 2022 or 2023. Municipalities agreed that the sooner that could happen, the better for municipalities. That would mean instead of getting 50% shared costs for our Blue Box program plan, we would get 100% of the costs covered. Again, I would remind everybody that we were unclear of what our role would be as municipalities in that plan. So municipalities talked with Stewardship Ontario, which is the current industry funding organization for the producers, and they struck an accord saying basically the principles of what they'd like to see in a new plan. And as a result of that, the minister sent them a letter directing them to figure out a way to amend the existing Blue Box program plan, and he wanted that by February 2018. A number of consultation sessions were held in the fall of 2017 to provide us with information of what we might see in that amended Blue Box program plan. There were several concerns identified in that plan from many different stakeholders, not just municipalities. And as a result of that, the amended Blue Box program plan was not submitted in February to the minister. And to be quite honest, since then, we haven't heard many details coming out besides the fact that municipalities and other stakeholders had some really big concerns over that plan and were not prepared to say that they liked it. Stewardship Ontario recognized that they needed some more time to look into that. And unfortunately, it's been pretty silent from the Ministry of the Environment at this time. And that's likely due to the provincial election that is coming. So how will this help us to continue to align with that Waste-Free Ontario Act? So you've heard me talk about in the past of what are the things that we need to be thinking of in Kingston to make sure that we're aligned with that piece of legislation. So we've gone through many reviews of a strategy to make sure that we're in a good place so that when we are able to transition to a full producer responsibility, we're ready for that. So we identified some key imperatives in the past to ensure that alignment, and one of those being that we must determine the future of the city's material recovery facility, whether or not that facility should become a regional material recovery facility. Most recently, we had started undertaking a procurement options analysis and final business plan to look at, is there value for money for the city perhaps to partner with an external party? Does it make sense for us to continue looking at that preferred design option of expanding to 25,000 tons per year from our existing capacity of about 15,000 tons per year? So, as a result of the amended Blue Box program plan not being submitted to the minister, it's very clear at this point that there may not be any amended Blue Box program plan that happens, and that we may just be looking for, instead of taking an interim step for a plan, we might just go right to that Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act, where there would be regulations. So instead of amending a plan to figure out how we could get some more money until they figure out how to fully transition, we might just be looking at waiting completely until 2022 or 2023. That is pretty firm on what we're hearing, and that's going to happen. So when all of this consultation was happening as well, we knew that municipalities were not going to have the first right to act as a service provider to deliver recycling processing, which meant that what would happen with our material recovery facility, we wouldn't necessarily have the choice to be a processor. We also heard during that time a lot of talk from producers saying that their preferred system is to have a super MRF system where they would have a number of very, very large material recovery facilities, likely doing 150,000 tons per year or greater, and then a network of transfer stations. So really during that consultation period, over into the new year, what we're hearing is that we're not likely to be selected as a processor to process a lot of tons. What we might be selected for is a transfer station or doing some kind of very minor processing. An example of that could be the Blue Box in Kingston. We could run it up a conveyor line, and maybe we would just pull steel off or aluminum off, or on the fiber line, you might do some light baling just to make it more economical for transportation. So again, I don't have all of the details of what the producers would want in that system at this point, but through those consultation sessions and the information we were provided, we are trying to be very low risk and make sure that we're not investing too much money into a MRF at this time if that's going to be their preferred model in the future. So in the meantime, it looks like we're going to continue to be responsible for post-collection for at least the next 5 years. So that made us look at, I think that we should be, or we're recommending that we shift that direction from a regional facility to a retrofit and complete our final business plan to meet the tonnage demands for the next 5 to 10 years, which is in line with how long we think we're going to be responsible for, and aim to reduce those operating costs and hopefully allow for the weekly collection of both blue and gray boxes. So an increase there to the service level that customers would receive. So right now it's an alternating system where a blue box is picked up 1 week and the next week a gray box is picked up. So with the retrofit, the intention would be a short-term goal of being able to collect both colored boxes every single week. And just quickly here, some benefits of that true dual stream system. Some removal of burden from having to sorting households materials, increase the frequency. So instead of 26 weeks of blue, 26 weeks of gray, you'd have 52 weeks of both. Increase the capture rate of recyclables. We know from waste audits, people may be throwing recyclables in the garbage because they have to wait 2 weeks. And we could possibly increase the capacity and size of the box that we use, and of course, potential cost savings in the future because there will be less sorting at the curbside, and of course, that convenience factor for our residents. But I do want to stress here that when we are finalizing that business plan, we want those retrofits to demonstrate a 5 to 10 year payback, plus an ability to adapt or convert to a transfer station in the future very easily to still align with how we think our role might play out in the future in a full producer responsibility regime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It wasn't quite clear to me, we would be maintaining a dual stream though. Like, would people still be sorting their own stuff in their own homes and then putting it out if you're picking up both? Okay, so, all right.
Yeah, so I will clarify on that. That's right. If we transitioned or we retrofitted the MRF to be a true dual stream facility, there would actually be no change to the homeowner, because what the homeowner doesn't know is when we arrive at their curb and pick up their blue box, we take the glass out of the box and put it in one compartment in the truck, and all of the other mixed blue box materials go into another. So our MRF, our material recovery facility, is actually a 4-stream facility, but it feels like a 2-stream to the customer. So I wouldn't be, at this time, especially with market conditions, wouldn't be recommending a single-stream facility still. They would still have to sort stuff in a gray box and stuff in a blue box.
Okay, it's okay with me. I think it's good that it's freely. The other thing is, I think you're carefully saying in here, like, first of all, let me say I really appreciate this report, because it's been like, dancing with mirrors, or clouded mirrors or something. And then every time you turn up, you tell us, we really don't know what's going on, but we'll tell you what it is we don't know. So I appreciate that, and that you're taking a prudent approach. However, I think, not in any negative sense, but it appears to me that you're sort of warning council that these assets that we're going to invest, you're suggesting we invest so we can keep going and be efficient and without too much money,
Is this leading to a question?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of my
thank
question. Are you warning council that these assets may be left high and dry, like they could be stranded?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's important we bring that up at council, so people know, and at least then we can say, hey, we're doing the best we can here with the information we've got. And I take it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're at a point where we have to improve the facility at this point. Things have moved so slowly, and this is the best route, that the most prudent and effective route at this point in time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
If we're going to be responsible for the next 5 years, we haven't made any significant investments into the equipment at the facility. And if we know at this point we're going to be responsible for 5 years, this is the time now to say we've got to do something so that we can continue operating and maintaining our responsibility in the system currently.
Okay. And you will be presenting at council again, or someone, or because this is going to take some explanation, right?
Okay. I'm not sure.
And I just think, to be open government, we should tell the public, look, this is the situation. To some marginal degree, these assets may be stranded, and there's really nothing we can do about it. But in the time, we have to operate, and operate effectively.
So if I could briefly interject, the intention was through the presentation here at committee, I think the process generally is we present here and it gets recommended to council. I honestly don't know what the process would be to take this recommendation to council, but I think if the committee would like us to present as part of the recommendation. I believe
that what typically would happen is if we pass this recommendation before us, it'll go to council as an EITP recommendation. Staff will be there And any member of council can separate that from the report and ask questions. So it will be definitely an open process.
I agree with that description. I'm just thinking staff should present when that comes up, that we should get a delegation to explain it. Otherwise, we're gonna have to explain it anyway, right? It's not gonna be clear to people why we're spending $5 million this way rather than that way. And most of council, never mind the public, is not listen to this whole process, right? That's what, been going on for a year and a half or something, at least.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Shell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sort of along the same lines, when we talk about this might become a stranded asset, that's because the government may decide that the producers have to do it all themselves without the city's involvement. Is that?
That's right. So the legislation is already set out that the intention is to move to a full producer responsibility regime, and that they will gain more control out of it. But the regulations are not set yet. So there's a legislation, but we don't actually know how the producers will be regulated to meet their obligations under the Act. So based on what we know now, we have an understanding that the producers will want to control that post-collection component of the Blue Box program, and that they may choose not to use Kingston's facility. I would also say that making an investment into the facility, that equipment would still have a residual value. So in a worst case where we're looking at a stranded facility, there could be residual value from that equipment, and it could still also play a role in processing and still being valuable, and the city being 100% reimbursed for all of its efforts that it's doing at that facility.
Thank you. It does make sense that the producers will use facilities that already exist. One question that was sort of alluded to, because it's an election year, and we're all sort of alert to what could happen. My understanding is that it actually costs more to recycle than just dump. And I'm interested in how solid the legislation is that another government could just come in this summer and say, cities, dump it. In some areas, legislation takes a long time to untangle. I suspect in Ontario it doesn't if there's a majority government. So that's mainly it. Or do you know? That's a bit of a tricky question.
It is a bit of a tricky question, and the legislation is passed, and when it was going through its readings, all parties agreed to it. Opposition parties were in favor of it. Anything can still happen, so I don't know. I think, again, sorry to do that, but I think if a new government came in, and even if it was a majority government, and talked about taking away Ontario's Blue Box system that people have grown so accustomed to, I would assume that Ontario would be quite upset with that. So I can't see it, I can't see a major setback in erasing all of the things that we've grown accustomed to for the last 30 years.
Actually, I'm with you, but I didn't realize that it was passed unanimously, so that's very encouraging. Thanks.
Thank you. Would you care to take the chair, if you would?
I take the chair and rest you.
Thank you. I want to thank you again. I had an opportunity to go to the AMO session with you. A couple of questions that came up out of that. My sense is that the producers seem to be dragging their heels in anticipation that the rules may change with the change of government. There was some talk among the tables about that. Would you care to comment on that at all?
I would say that's certainly on a lot of people's mind of what could happen. I think what most of us are feeling is that there was a certain date assigned to this in the Waste Free Ontario Act, building the circular economy strategy. So there was a roadmap that's part of this legislation as well that laid out that by 2022, 2023, they hoped to transition the Blue Box program plan to a full producer responsibility regime. And so I think what everyone is waiting for to find out is how much of a priority is that going to be for a new government, and how could producers perhaps influence that priority on a new provincial leader?
Thank you. And question regarding the MRF. I know I was lobbied good-naturedly by some local townships about the potential for us creating a contract situation with them. The only question I would have, if that were to happen, I'm assuming we would have full cost recovery, administration, capital, anything else, and that we currently have the capacity to be able to serve that and be able to have it not impact at all on city taxpayers. Is that an accurate assumption?
So to clarify that, we already do have 2 service agreements with neighboring municipalities, both South Frontenac Township and Loyalist Township. We've had for a number of years service agreements with them to provide them with recycling processing operations. And that's right. So it is, we share actual costs, actual revenue, actual capital, and we charge them an administrative overhead. So we don't act as a contractor to them. We act as a processor, and we provide them with a budget every year, bill them based on the budget, and then we do a reconciliation the following year to make sure that all of our actual costs are shared appropriately based on the tonnage that they've delivered and that we've processed for them.
And I'm glad you brought up, or somebody brought up, the topic of stranded assets, because that was a big talking point at that day meeting, AMO meeting. The $5 million that we're proposing, that will create greater efficiency over the next several years, but we won't be creating the potential for any additional stranded assets, would we, with that?
So I'll just take a moment here to clarify that the $5 million was already approved as part of the 2018 capital budget. I don't have numbers at this point because we would have to do a request for proposal for the actual retrofits that we would want to do. I don't believe at all that it's going to be $5 million. I think what the $5 million was asked for and requested before was a major expansion of what we have today to go from 15,000 to 25,000. What we would be looking at right now is just maintaining that existing capacity of 15,000 tons, knowing we've got a little bit of extra capacity perhaps for some other municipalities that want to have a service agreement, and in making sure that we're able to process the existing tonnage that we have today as efficiently as possible and lower our operating costs.
That's reassuring. Thank you. My final question, crass political question. This is an election year. Going to gray and a blue box pickup on the same day, I think would be very, very popular with our residents. Will that, what's the timeline for that potentially happening, or at least the announcement that that will be happening? I told you it'd be crass and political question.
I think it's going to be a while. So if we were to move forward right now with finalizing the business plan, taking a look at what kind of retrofits give us a good payback period, then we would have to do a request for proposal for a design and a build. So, from now until then, we could be looking at 18 months. And so there's a lot of things still to be looked at before we should be announcing that we're definitely going to go to a weekly blue and gray box collection.
Thank you.
For the next election, Councillor Neal.
That'll
I
concern
return
you,
the chair
not me.
to you. 2022.
So,
I return the chair
thank
to you.
you. So thank you very much. We'll move on to the business. It's 7A, which has a recommendation regarding the briefing. Are there any further questions from the committee to staff regarding the recommendation? Seeing none, are there any members of the public that would like to speak? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon. Thank you to staff for the report on the briefing and the questions. Very interesting discussion. I just have some questions along similar lines to those already raised and some other ones as well. So recently in Toronto media, there's been some extensive coverage of the problem of spoilage through inappropriate contents in recycle bins. And this sort of led to basically front page articles in the Toronto Star and this kind of thing. So I'm wondering if this is a problem in Kingston and how much of the recycling winds up getting spoiled through contents that are inappropriate to the boxes. So that's one question. Following along from what Councillor Neal was just raising a little while ago, with respect to the idea of the dual pickup each week, like a blue and gray box each week, I'm wondering if there are any Ontario cities that are already doing this and what the extra costs would be, if you have a number on that yet. Okay, and then along with what one of the councillors on the committee was talking about, the just dump it scenario, I'm wondering if there's a federal oversight provision on that, because Canada has signed on to international agreements on things like climate change. So I'm just wondering if that could be explored. And with respect to the provider-producer taking responsibility in the circular economy scenario, as was presented in the briefing, I'm wondering if there are other jurisdictions that are doing that yet. Like, this was the first I'd heard of it when the concept was brought to this committee. So it's certainly forward-thinking. I applaud the people who are working on this and making it happen, but I'm wondering if we have a scenario, whether it's in North America or maybe in Europe or somewhere else, where this has been advanced further, and I'm wondering if staff may be able to report on that when they follow up. So thank you.
Thank you. Some of that goes farther afield than what the current is, but I think that those are all fairly reasonably answered questions, if you're comfortable answering those. Are there any other members of the public? Seeing none, go right ahead.
Through you, your chair. Thank you for the questions. So we are very aware of the information that has been in the Toronto Star and the CBC doing stories on the City of Toronto's recycling program. And we, in fact, have put out a news release and called it Recycling as Usual in Kingston, so that our residents know they're doing very well and we're not expecting any program changes for them. But we are watching the effects of China's national sword. China is not taking in waste from North America at this point, and if they are, it has to be a 0.5% contamination rate. But currently, the majority of our materials that we market from the material recovery facility are supported in a North American marketplace. So we were not reliant on a foreign market. So we are continuing to do very well. The revenue from the sale of recyclables has lowered, and the City of Toronto does things significantly different than us. They have a one cart for all of their recycling, referred to as single stream in the waste industry, where all homeowners throw everything in there. As they deliver the material right to their facility, they already have 25% of the incoming recycling is garbage. In the city of Kingston, we have a different program. We have open top boxes, which are in alternating weeks, so we rely a lot on the resident to do the sorting, and we're pretty strict at the curb if anyone's ever had a box not collected. And our incoming contamination rate is typically between 5 and 7%, so significantly lower than what the City of Toronto sees. So right away, the commodities that we're producing for sale on the marketplace are already significantly better than the City of Toronto's, even if we didn't pick any of the garbage out of it. With regards to your question on a the dual pickup, very, very many communities in Ontario already pick up both colored boxes every single week. I'm sorry, I don't have stats on what those costs are, but we're hopeful that the less time that you actually have to spend at the curb, we could see some collection costs decrease in the future if we were to do that, because right now our collectors have to spend more time at the curb taking glass out of a blue box or cardboard out of a gray box. So I don't have any information on that. With regards to the federal level, I know that they are trying to take a stand on reducing plastics. Other than that, I don't have a lot of information on how that might affect provinces. I suspect that it will in the future when more details are released. And yes, many European countries have the circular economy model.
Thank you very much. We'll move back to the committee. If there's a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Sanik. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, could you take over the chair if you would? I just want to say that I really appreciate this recommendation. We should be really proud of the job that the city does. We're one of only 3 communities that indeed have hit or surpassed the 60% target. And we, in speaking to one of the questions asked by Mr. Dixon, we have one of the best reputations for clean recyclables. And so we've been able to maintain our markets with the dual system and a really low contamination rate, which other communities have not been as successful at. So I think we have an excellent program now, and this proposal will, I believe, only improve on that. And I'm reassured to hear that we may indeed not need $5 million, but we'll be able to make more efficient a system that already, I can tell you from the meeting I attended, that already is the envy of many other municipalities in the province. So I'm clearly speaking in favor of this.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I'll take over as chair. Next on our agenda, under business, didn't we vote? Oh, you have a question? Okay, Councillor Hutchinson, one more question. I thought you were going. No.
Okay. I have a 3-part question. One, I wanted to know what our recycling rate is now. Councillor Neil may know, but he just referenced it. And that's an election question. Where we're at, and it sounds like we also sort the recycling when it gets to the depot. So what percentage of garbage do we have when we're done doing our sifting? And when China says 0.5, that's 0.5 of 1%, I presume. How attainable is that? Or is it just a way to restrict imports? I'm just trying to get it on the framework of what we're doing. That's all.
So through you, your chair. Good questions. I'm going to try and make sure that I've got it all answered. So our recycling rate, I think you're talking about waste diversion rate, correct? So we have just submitted our 2017 data to the authority for review, and then they will submit our approved final rubber stamped number. But I would say that we're still somewhere between the 59 to 61%, although I don't like to say a number until it's all verified by the province. How attainable is it to achieve 0.5% contamination? It's pretty difficult, and so they sent a message saying that they don't want garbage anymore from North America or recyclables that contain too much garbage. There's two different kinds of contamination in a bale of finished recyclables. So if you were looking at a bale of newsprint, you can have what's called other browns. So if you baled newsprint and you were just selling newspapers in a bale, and you had boxboard in it or cardboard in it, they don't really look at that as contaminations. They're just outthrows. They're still, they'll recover those at the next stage that they go to, like a paper mill. What they don't want are plastics, metals, and other mixed kind of items in there. So I said at the door, the incoming recyclables that hit our facility through audits, we know that we have about a 5 to 7% garbage coming in, and after we sort through it all and separate the commodities by their type, our residue rate out of our facility is usually about 6.5%. So we would be pretty close actually to that 0.5% rate. But it's not, it varies across the 12 different commodities that we actually sell at the facility. So some streams could be better than others. It's tough to know. We do bale audits for contamination, usually once a year or once every 2 years. And I don't have those stats in front of me, but I can tell you that in comparison to other municipalities or other MRFs that kind of study is done, we stack up very close to the top of the list for having great material.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Sanik.
You, Mr. Chair, just one question then about newsprint and cardboard. So if we have, did I just hear you? So if we have a cereal box, that's considered cardboard. So we shouldn't put it in the same bag as our newspapers?
Cereal box is called boxboard. Sorry to get so technical. No, your cereal box can still go in a plastic grocery bag with your newspaper. Cardboard is corrugated cardboard, and if you have a lot of it, it should be bundled beside your gray box, or if you have 1 or 2 pieces, that's okay to just put right in the gray box, but it should be loose.
Thanks, but then is that when boxboard can go with newspapers? Thanks. See, these things are educational.
Seeing no other questions, I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And I just want to do a little lobbying. I've been invited to join the AMO as a municipal rep on the AMO Waste Management Steering Provincial Committee, and that will probably be going on the agenda at our next meeting. So consider yourself lobbied. So I will move on to the next order of business, B, which is Stormwater Management Program Overview. And that's has a recommendation that I'm sure we've all had an opportunity to read. Would staff like to comment on this, or you just, go ahead.
I've just got some introductory comments, if I may. My name is Adam Hardy. I'm a supervising engineer for the design group in engineering services. To my right, we have our director, Mark Campbell, and to his right, our Deputy Commissioner of Transportation Infrastructure Services, Mark Van Buren. The information report before you was prepared by staff at the direction of Council to provide the EITP committee with an overview of the stormwater management program currently being carried out by engineering services. The program evolved from the City of Kingston's Master Stormwater Management Plan and is a living document to prioritize the implementation of stormwater infrastructure throughout the city, serving as a 4-year operational plan for stormwater improvements. Within this report, staff has provided examples of these prioritized tasks and projects. The stormwater management program has been organized into 3 broad divisions. First, research and policy development. Second, planning and design. And third, construction, operations, and maintenance. In this report, staff has listed its proposed priorities for the stormwater management program in the next multi-year infrastructure plan for each of these identified broad divisions, and summarized stormwater management work being carried out by other city departments. With respect to low-impact development initiatives, the report outlines the number of the operational plan's current priorities, provides construction and maintenance costs for LID features that were installed as part of recent city projects, and summarizes the challenges and lessons learned from implementing LID initiatives in public spaces and educating residents on how best to manage stormwater on their own properties. We look forward to answering any questions you may have about this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Sanik.
Because we're all interested, because it keeps raining. My question has to do with, near the end, private property, where it mentions the city may require property owners who undertake developments that increase the imperviousness of their lot in flood-prone areas to manage any increased surface water runoff. The way I read that is, currently we can't require anyone to do more than the Ontario Building Code, is my understanding. But this seems to be saying that we might be able to require property owners that undertake developments where we know there might be flooding, that they're going to have to mitigate it. But, so where I'm leading is when we talk about asphalt that is pervious, that's the word, yeah. Or, you know, the blocks that the city's going to do some in a park, just put blocks in so the grass can grow in between. We can't require that. That's where I'm leading. Like, but what can we sort of force people to do to manage their own runoff, stormwater runoff?
So what we're looking at is, again, I guess, development applications coming in, and in these flood-prone areas, neighborhoods, providing stricter requirements for the approvals in terms of managing stormwater on site. So if they're increasing the imperviousness or hardness of the property, that there would be requirements in place that they would not have any increased surface runoff from their property. What we can, what they propose is up to the developer to submit in engineering to sort of review and comment upon. But typically we would see something like LID or low impact development features, something like we've seen infiltration trenches, which is, I guess, a validated or approved technology in the Ontario Stormwater Management Plan from 2003. Essentially, you're looking at maybe it's a swale, perhaps vegetated with plantings and stuff like that, with subsurface granulars to sort of encourage stormwater to drain and infiltrate through that feature, as opposed to flowing out towards neighbors or towards the street or something like that. If that answers your question.
In the sense that we still can't sort of force people to do some of what might be the newer technologies. But just to further that, there was a part in here that did talk about encouraging property owners to create swales, as you said, but also enforce it. And I think that, as a councillor, has been a serious problem. People filling in swales for gardens, and the city currently can't get involved. When people do that in their backyard, that becomes a neighbor to neighbor. But I understand that there's a change in that I read in here, that we're going to actually put it on the deed. Is that my interpretation, that you may not fill in this stormwater management area?
So we're looking at very cases. So in flood-prone areas, if there are, for example, infill development applications, we would be looking at enhanced stormwater management as a requirement of approvals.
Can I just comment on that, if I might? I know that our official plan speaks strongly about that, and it's my understanding that the burden of proof by developers now is to prove that they are handling all of the stormwater efficiently on their site, that none of it will go on to neighboring sites. And I have to say, the planning department, the planners have been quite strict about that, and we are now on major projects having that as one of the peer-reviewed items. The result is the next two projects proposed, if approved, in Williamsville will have green roofs. And the only reason they'll have green roofs is because that's the only way that they can prove that their developments will not impact neighboring properties. So we are gradually moving in that direction. If any of that was misspoke, feel free to correct me, but.
No concerns.
Just to further, private property owners, not apartment buildings or condos, that sort of thing, because that's still a major issue that comes up.
Mr. Van Buren's waiting, so go ahead.
Stormwater is a topic near and dear to my heart, so I'll jump in a little bit here. So in terms of the typical forms of land development, we typically have either large tract land developments in the form of subdivisions, and I think the councillors or the committee members will know that we have stormwater management plans that are submitted by those developers that are meant to address stormwater quantity and quality related issues. At a site planning level, where we may have an individual development, commercial, industrial, again, the developer is going to be submitting to us a stormwater management plan that, again, is going to address how they're going to be managing water quantity, water quality. I think, Councillor Shaw, your question was more related to the individual lot that may be redeveloping or an infill type development at the full subdivision. So I probably don't have anything more to add to what Mr. Hardy had mentioned, but again, the controls I think are well established in the city's policy that again reflects an awful lot of the guidance that we get from the province in terms of means and methods to deal with water quantity control and also the quality improvements that are also required.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Hutchison, and then Councillor Sadik.
Has more to do with the existing issues? Like, I know of properties that are low-lying and so they flood, and this is referred to, I think, under, oops, excuse me, on page 8, to private property. And I'm just wondering if there's, like, we're concerned about people allowing storm water to come off their property and get into the city system and affect our sanitary system and so on. And that's fine, that's good. But I wonder if there's a program, it seems to be a program. It's not about imperviousness, it's just got to do with what do people do with water that collects on their property. And there's nowhere for it to go. And do we have do we come out and consult with people and say, well, you could do this, you could do that? And because I was actually asked that question recently. You know, and I said, well, I'm not sure the city gets involved in that, and why would they? And the answer was, well, because the city is there to help us. So that's where I'm coming from. How will we help people that are in that situation? Because it seems to be part of this program.
Yeah, so we do get drainage concerns that come into the city, either from residents themselves or their neighbors, and we do get in contact with those residents and perform site visits and provide advice for for options they may want to pursue on their own property. Sometimes looking at low impact development features, perhaps disconnecting your rain leader into a rain barrel or a rain garden, something of that nature, or regrading your property. Utilities Kingston runs their everything drainage workshops that speak specifically to different measures that you can take on your own property to help improve stormwater management and making sure that your eaves troughs are cleared and things of that nature. As I mentioned, sort of lock grading and things like that. Utilities Kingston has a rain barrel program. So actually, if you're a Utilities Kingston customer, they will deliver a rain barrel to your home for a nominal fee, and you can connect those in chain to sort of capture stormwater, so it's not leaving your site or impacting your property, causing additional surface runoff. So things of that nature.
Okay, I guess the situation is more like when there's snow cover and it melts, but it's got nowhere to go. And in fact, properties around appear to be draining into this property. So I presume you're not, perhaps you can answer the question, is it accurate to say that you can't build up your own property in order that water doesn't drain onto it, in fact, probably goes the other way? Is that accurate?
So, I mean,
So what's the bylaws around that?
So best management, you'd obviously want to sort of drain water away from your property, but if that means draining it towards your neighbor's property, you're going to probably want to, what we recommend is that you consult with that neighbor to sort of come up with a mutually beneficial solution. As Councillor Shell mentioned, in newer subdivisions, you'll see side yard swales where each home can sort of drain down to a drainage feature that carries water away. So that's something that we've seen residents in consultation with their neighbors sort of implement, a common drainage channel to something like a low impact development feature to sort of help absorb or infiltrate stormwater.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Public spaces, and we have the bioswale gardens that exist right now on Alwington Avenue at King Street. So how does that work? So if a plant does die over the winter time, are the residents supposed to contact Public Works, or are they just supposed to replant them themselves? Like, how is that sort of working right now in that one pilot project area?
Yeah, so we regularly monitor that bioswale feature. We've got a annual maintenance contract with a contractor that will make a few visits per year and sort of do maintenance cleanup and just helping to ensure the health and viability of the plants. So in a spring cleanup, for example, when they're taking care of dirt and debris and leaves and whatnot, they would report back to the city about plants that may have died off for one reason or another, and we would sort of assess why that might be and arrange for installation of new plantings.
So the owner doesn't really have to do anything then?
Well, we look to the resident volunteers to maybe do some weeding in between scheduled maintenance by the contractor. Public Works does their street sweeping program and also keeps an eye on these features as well.
Okay. And then do we see it sometimes, like in the future, evolving to if a homeowner had their own boulevard garden in front of their house, do we see sometime in the future that that homeowner could actually volunteer to have their house more made into a bioswale garden? Do we see that maybe happening in the future sometime in 5 years or so?
I can't comment on the time frame. I would say right now we're still in very much a pilot project phase where we're sort of evaluating how the feature is functioning. We have plans for a more comprehensive monitoring program. There's opportunities to do a better job at promotion of these features so that people are aware of them and the benefits that they do have to stormwater quantity and quality. So I think before we do some sort of rollout like that, we'd want to have a better understanding of what it takes to sort of construct and maintain these assets and monitor them long term.
And just my last point for the private property, I think that public education that you mentioned on page 15 and again on page 16 is so important because Adam, like I know that I've referred so many people to you, right? Like Prince Charles Drive, and there was a situation with Humberside, somebody built a deck and that affected the drainage of their next door neighbor, and that one street off of Rick Hansen Drive, right, that seemed to be ongoing, the neighbor affecting that neighbor. So I think public education is very important about how all the homeowners should know that they can't, they can't affect the drainage of their neighbors surrounding them, because I think a lot of homeowners don't even think about that when they put in new landscaping or new features in their backyard. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, that was a very fulsome conversation. I want to thank staff, and we will move on to, this was information only. If I could just mention, I mentioned in passing to both the clerk and the commissioner, since Keith had a working group on this very topic, if we could include, if we can share this electronically with Keith board members and have it as part of the package for the next Keith meeting, that would be great. Okay? So, I guess I'm mistaken. I thought on information items we didn't invite the public to speak, but I guess we do. So if any members of the public would like to speak to this?
Thanks to staff for the report and the presentation and the questions so far. I think we're all learning a lot about this. So I've got a couple of points that haven't been raised yet. You're looking at sort of general patterns and programs and steps you can take, but I'm wondering if you're doing any work on focusing on major events and what they are doing. And we had one recently, right? We had a big storm in basically the middle of April. We had 8 inches of snow, and we had, winds and cold and that kind of thing, at a time when most of the snow had melted. So I'm wondering if staff have studied that event with a view to trying to extract interesting information from it that could be applied to the program of the ongoing stormwater management program work. And my second question is I'm wondering if you have anything specific on Bell Park to bring to this committee's attention, because as we remember last year, the golf was basically lost at Bell Park due to very high water, and then it led to the closure of the facility eventually, right? There was no golf season, and we're now at the time of year when the high water started coming in, not only at Bell Park, but also around the region, right? It was sort of a 100-year high water mark, due not only to, say, rain and snow and runoff here, but also in Ottawa Valley and around Montreal and that kind of thing, and on the Great Lakes, because they have to manage all of those bodies of water. So I'm just wondering if there are any updates there. It seems that the most recent event that we had hasn't had an impact on what's happening at, say, Bell Park, which is a very low-lying area, right? So I'll just put that question on the record. I'll be taking it to Bell Park Working Group as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to staff who may want to comment on either of those questions.
Sure. I guess with regards to the first question regarding major storm events, particularly ones that are compounded by snow and intense, long-duration rainfall. The city, or the Engineering Services Department, actually commissioned a WSP consultant late last year, following another significant storm event that happened on July 4th, 2017, where there's a lot of homeowners experienced basement flooding, and we heard a lot from residents, particularly in low-lying areas like Redendale. The city commissioned a stormwater study to look at these areas where historically they've been more susceptible to flooding. WSP is currently in the midst of completing their studies, the follow to which will be recommendations for improved operations or maintenance, and short and long-term solutions to help reduce flood risk in these areas. Redendale being one of the first areas that we looked at, and we actually held a neighborhood information session there with residents as well to sort of keep them in the loop in terms of what we were doing. Another one would be St. Lawrence Avenue and Treasure Island. And there's various other spots around town, Eunice Drive, Gardner's Road Underpass, things of that nature. So we've identified these areas where we do see issues, particularly during major rainfall events, and we're in the midst of having our consultant work through that study at the moment.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to notices of motion. Seeing none. Other business? Seeing none. Correspondence. Date and time of next meeting is Monday, June 11th. And we need a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Schell. Thank you, Councillor Hutchison. All those in favor?